Hey, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about strings. And strings are actually objects. So we're actually going to start talking about objects in this course. And I want to talk about strings first because they are used so much that it makes it easier to learn other objects by learning strings first. So when you do a system.print line, this actually takes in multiple different parameters. So if you go to print line, we talked about method overriding before, but print line can take in no arguments, and it just creates a new line. So if you just do print line, and you do print line again, and you do print line again, right, it's going to just print out new lines. So let's see what happens here. Well, actually, you can see there's like 3 spaces here. But then you can also take in a boolean as a parameter. It can take in a char, it can take in an int, and actually the shortcut of seeing this is if you just do this. Instead of doing SOUT, you just do dot. Print line, you can see all the different parameters it takes in. It auto tries to fill it for you. And you can see that it takes in a string, as you can see highlighted in blue on my screen. So when we actually do the print line, we pass in something like this in quotes. It is actually a string. How cool is that? So we've actually been using strings this whole time. So that is the first part of this lesson that show you that we've actually been using string objects. Now let's talk about how to create a string object. So we can do something like string s equals new string, right? And we can just pass in, actually I'm gonna copy and paste this. I am a string. And then you can also create it like this, string s1 equals, I am a string. So there are 2 ways to create a string. You can either use the new word, which is a keyword in Java, just like public and static and void are keywords, and like if and while and so forth. So you can't create a variable called new because it is a keyword, right? Well, the new keywords actually signify that you're creating a new instance of an object. So you say object, whatever type it is, A equals new A, string S equals new string, B equals new B, and so forth. And we'll talk about new more in detail in the next couple lessons. But anyways, so we have this new string, and we have this just equals whatever value this is, right? And let's say we want to compare, let's take a step back here and talk about how we compare ints, right? So we have int a equals 5, and we have int b equals 5, and we're going to compare their values. So again, a print line statement can take in a boolean. So let's actually compare these 2 values. We can say a equals b, and we print this out, we should get true. We're also printing out this print line selection. Let me remove that so it's not in the way. But you can see we have true here, right? Because to compare 2 primitive data types, whether it's a double or an int or a char, you just do double equals. So that's how you compare primitive data types. But let's say we try to compare 2 objects, such as these 2 strings. Again, strings are objects. We try to compare S1 and S2, and let's see what happens. Sorry, S and S1, not S1 and S2. So we try to compare S and S1 using double equals, and let's see what happens. And we get false. And you're probably thinking, well, it worked for ints, and it works for, like you said, any primitive data type, like a double and a char. Why doesn't it work for objects? Why can't you compare 2 objects with double equals? Well, double equals actually compares memory addresses. So, for example, let's say this is stored in memory address 1, and this is stored in memory address 2. Well, now you're comparing where they're stored, not their actual values, and you're saying that S is not stored in the same place as S1, therefore it will return false. So how do you actually compare 2 objects in Java? Well, you actually use something called a method called dot equals, and dot equals takes in a parameter, so S, so you pass in a method call for this function, S dot equals, and then it takes in another object. It can take in any other object. For example, you have an animal object or some other object. We'll talk about more objects later. But you have another object that's not a string. You can actually compare that to a string. So actually, let's create an example here of such variety. So let's actually do this. Let's actually create a test object, because you can actually create an instance of an object in the same class that is actually from, and say if compare s to test and see if that's true. So we can actually pass any object here and it will return false, because the first check equals method does is it checks if they're the same type. So the type is what type of object it is. Well, this type is of type test and this object's type is of type string. So it automatically returns false pretty quickly because it knows that they're not the same type, therefore it will always be false. So that's how you compare two different types of objects, and obviously it will always be false. But let's say we want to compare two objects of the same type, which is what we usually want to do. We never want to compare two objects of different types because it will always be false. We want to compare, for example, s and s1, so we pass in, instead of test here, we pass in s1, which is another string. So you're comparing two strings with the same exact value, right? They're assigned the same value if I am a string. Okay, so they should return true, because we're not comparing memory addresses, we're comparing actual values. And we do get the value true. So if we change this to I am a string with like two G's, for example, so now they're not the same value, it will return false. Let's see that in action. And there we go. So now we know how to compare two objects in Java. So it's actually very common to compare objects. For example, if you have a program that checks if a person's name is, like, let's say they enter the name, you're trying to compare it to their name and their license or another documentation, you want to compare the values of their first name and last name. So comparing objects is a very, very common function that we use in Java. But more so, this lesson is more about talking about strings and how they work and how they're actually an object. So in the next lessons, we're actually going to talk more about objects and how they work.